What up, Gripsters and random YouTubers? Evan here for Grips.com, and I hope you had a great weekend and are ready for some learning. I'm back with part 3 of my Saturday Challenge win review, where I banked off a $55 freeze out for about $7,200. And in case you missed it, I just picked up a bunch of chips, getting it in with Ace King versus Ace Queen. And a little bit before that, I got in Ace Queen versus King Queen. So, been getting in good for heaps of chips and holding up. At this point, there were probably about 40 or 50 players left in the tournament, meaning pressure's on, more shorthanded play will be happening, and I'll probably be getting involved in some more action. Fortunately, we have a bunch of chips to work with, and yeah. Although, why do we only have 130? Guess we lost a pot somewhere in there. Anyway, so here with the raise and a reshove ahead, not going to get involved in the action. Would have been very tempted to get involved had, it just been an open ahead of us from Cruel, but wouldn't have certainly gotten involved. Here with Ace 3, it's a hand that I definitely would have opened, and with Rust Box opening on this stack of chips, like 35 big blinds, I think he has enough room to be raising and folding. So with a blocker in my hand and a super good semi-bluffing hand, I opt to go for the 3-bet and take it down. I guess I'm not going to just play through the hands at this point because, well, we're going to be getting involved in more action. Here with threes, it's the same spot as Ace 3 suited, except we have more players to get through, and our hand doesn't have as good blocker value as Ace 3 does, so I'll probably just fold here. 8-4 suited gonna fold, 4-8 off gonna fold, and Ace King probably not gonna be folding. I use the, what is it, like half pot open on 888, so it's probably gonna be 5,500. Go for the min, and this is an easy call. Ace King, not too much to analyze there. He's got aces, and couldn't win that one. Facing the shove of like under 20 blinds, I'm never folding Ace King, especially with chips behind. I forget if Felix was a tight player or a loose player. Doesn't really matter that much though. Even if he is really tight, it's a spot that I'm going to be calling every single time. Just like how I'm going to be raising every single time I get dealt Ace 9 on the button. Queen 9 is a hand I would open if folded to, and I'll kind of just click through every hand that I would probably open if folded to until I see some action ahead. This King 7 suited would be a little bit light, but if I feel that the players behind aren't being too active, it's definitely a hand that we can justify raising with. And we will fold a few hands. Like to see me open 5-4. I opt not to, and no big deal. When deciding whether or not to open, the players left to act behind you, their stack sizes, and their tendencies as to whether or not they like to 3-bet, and we see Lazy Cash likes to do a lot of that, is going to be more important than your hand. Your hand and what type of hand you have is important when you think you may get played back at, and if you're going to get played back at, how you're going to get played back at, whether it be from someone flat calling your open, in which case, a high card hand or strong suited hand is better, or if you think you're going to get 3-bet, where having a hand you can 4-bet with is more important, like a pair or good ace. So fold there. Probably won't be folding here though. And on this flop, we're feeling pretty good. Default play is to c-bet and get value from an ace. Occasionally I do mix it up and check back on these kind of boards to really under-rep my hand. But there are a lot of hands that can give us action here. Any ace is going to call, any queen is probably going to call, so any gut shot's going to call. Any Broadway hand has connected with this board pretty well and can give us value. So see me bet again and just take it down. And for those of you who are wondering, no, I was probably not folding if El Sueno put it all in. And he's going to be one to watch. He is someone who goes into the final table with, I forget if it's a lot of chips or gets a lot of chips, but he ends up going very deep. So let's quickly see how that happened. He holds with jacks. And at this point, actually, I'm going to probably go through most of the hands just so we can see what's going on game flow wise. When you get more shorthanded in a tournament and every decision is that much more important, that much more magnified, it's important to pay attention to every little detail that you can. And just in the interest of mimicking that as much as possible, so you guys can kind of get in the zone and the habit of doing that, while we might as well just go through most of the hands. All right, so back to full ring. Action's going to be a little slower, and again, now that dynamic is not going to be happening as frequently, so I will go back to skipping some hands. But as we get more short-handed, we will slow things down and pay attention. King, queen, pretty standard open, and flopping 2 overcards and a flush draw. I was pretty happy to c-bet this board. I have a decent amount of equity. I didn't want to check call with king high, so I just fire a c-bet and get 1 caller. I remember this turn very well. It gave me both showdown value, what I believed was probably the best hand, but also, you know, it wasn't a hand that necessarily connected with a ton of the hands that I'm opening with and c-betting from this position. So with there being a pot size bet behind, I opted to check and feign weakness. I knew that I was never folding with top pair, second nut flush draw, but I thought maybe he might think he can push me off a hand like jacks or tens with no spade, or a smaller pair that does or doesn't have a spade, or, you know, like ace king, ace jack, those sorts of hands. If I bet again, I felt like I would look fairly strong. It would look like I probably wasn't folding, and with just kind of how nutted this turn card was for me, I wanted to give him the opportunity to try to take me off my hand. So I checked, he shoved, and I happily called. And to my dismay, he turned over a set of 4s. Wasn't too much I could do. Obviously, sets are going to be a possibility, but sometimes you catch lightning in a bottle and it doesn't really matter. So that was a very critical pop for me, and I think at that point kind of everything started to go my way. 60 blinds deep here. I think flatting is an option. 3-betting, of course, is also an option, but I wanted to under-rep my hand and just kind of let lazy cash fire away. I like my hand at this point. I want to go for a value bet, get called by any ace that's pot controlling, any jack that's pot controlling. I think anywhere between 14 and 21,000 is fine. I bet and take it down. And I remember lazy cash being really aggressive, so we'll see if I, you know, take advantage of that at all by giving him opportunities to get aggressive and try to hang himself. And it's important to do that, to kind of let aggressive players do the driving for you, doing the action, and just kind of giving them rope, letting them bet, letting them put the pressure on. And with passive players, it's important that you take the lead and do the driving. So here with nines, it's a pretty strong hand, and I'm definitely seeing at least 3 cards. The question is, do I see 3 or 5? I didn't know enough about lazy cash yet to know if I could 4-bet this for value with the intention of calling off. If he's doing this 3-betting with small pairs and then planning to 5-bet them in, obviously 4-betting with nines and calling would be extremely profitable, but I just didn't know that yet, so I decided I would, take the more cautious approach, try to get good boards, check call, just kind of like tread lightly. I don't really see any other way to play this hand but to check call and check check. And the question now is on the river to put out a value bet or to check and induce bluffs. Can he call with ace high? If I bet small, I'm not sure. You can definitely call with smaller pairs. And the question is, how many of those does he have? Is he going to put me on like an ace high float or a king queen float or something and try to be a hero? As I was just mentioning, when you're dealing with aggressive players, you have to let them, play to their own strengths and use their momentum against them, like some of the kung fu techniques out there. So knowing lazy cash was an aggressive player, I opted to check, give him an opportunity to take one more stab at this pot. And I didn't love this situation. He can definitely 3-bet with, bigger pairs, c-bet the flop, check back, and bet the river for value. Looking back at the hand now, I think he's more likely to do that if he has a heart in his hand, and if he doesn't have a heart, he's going to keep firing away. So combination-wise, that would mean that takes out like about half the hands, half of his value hands that could have taken this line otherwise. So these are a decent amount of bluffs, and either way, I'm getting 2.7, 6 to 1. I need to be right about a quarter of the time to be making a good call here, and it's just my hand is too strong for me to fold. I'm like pretty near the top of my range for a hand that calls a 3-bet out of position, then check calls the flop. So I called, and he had the air ball, and suddenly I found myself with the table chip lead and a nice little dynamic created with lazy cash that I was capable, and I wasn't necessarily just going to be pushed around. Here, 7-5 suited. We see the big blind has 10 bigs, and I didn't really want to open versus that stack size. So I just folded. And probably don't fold ace jack. Nope, just walk it out. And I probably don't fold ace ace either. Options here, as usual, are to 3-bet or to just flat call. Him opening on 22 bigs. I'm not sure how often he's going to be opening light on this stack size. I really think I could go either way with this hand, and I probably opted to 3-bet, just hoping that I could stack the value portion of his range. As long as I'm going to be 3-betting as a bluff when he opens off this stack size, then I should be doing it with my value hands. And 3-bet the AA, but no action today. Just gonna fold versus that 9 big blind shove. If I had like king queen suited there, probably go with it, but queen jack suited, no need. And Pitbull gets knocked out shortly after. Okay, great hand to open here, especially 6-handed. We get 3-bet, and I'm getting an extremely good price, so calling's a good option. I have a blocker, and this guy 3-bets a lot, so 4-betting's an option. And I chose to fold because I didn't want to play a 3-bet pot out of position with ace small. It really came down to the fact that this guy had a lot of stack behind and could put a lot of pressure on me and put me in an awkward spot. So despite the fact that I was getting quite good pot odds, I opted to fold. I'd be interested to hear what you guys like to do in that situation, because I think it's one where all options are fine, but I would like to know why you guys and girls would choose the option that you do, because it's not always so important as to what action you take in poker, but why you take said action. And if you can justify that action, explain why you feel it has more value given all the conditions that are going on, then it's probably a good play. And especially if you can convince people to your way of thinking, then it's probably a good play, because if your play made no sense, no matter how hard you try to justify it, it's probably going to be pretty hard to convince people of anything. And here I flop top pair, top kicker, and I think most people just automatically c-bet on this board. And Lazy Cash has shown he's aggressive. He likes to take shots at pots. And I remember this being a board where, you know, it's pretty wet. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of draws. And that's a good board for him to put some pressure on me with. So I believe I checked to feign weakness and just be like, you know, this is a board I don't really like. I don't want to bet and get raised is the impression I'm trying to give him. And I'm giving myself a chance to get value from his entire range. I think he's going to bet with every single hand he flats with pre-flop when I check to him on this board. And when we're this deep, he's going to be flatting with a lot of hands pre-flop. So I check call. Check raising would just kind of let the cat out of the bag right away. And I really just want to let him kind of drive the bus here. And I continue with my story by checking the turn. Now, on the river, I think he's going to check back with showdown value. I think he probably would have two-barreled his air on the turn, or his like drawing hand. So I think he's more weighted towards made hands. And also, given that I called his suicide line earlier of bet check bet, I don't think he's going to be as likely to try that again. So I want to get some value out of this hand. Also, if he had like king queen or something like that, he almost certainly would have bet, so I don't think I lost value from the top end of his range. So I definitely need to bet. The question is how much. I wanted to make it look like I had a missed flush draw. So I believe I bet about 2/3 pot. No, I went with the 1/3 pot to give him a really good odds to call with a wide range. And he obliged by calling me with sixes. Now, I think in retrospect, if I had some sort of draw, I probably would have bet the flop. So I don't know why he's hero calling with sixes. But perhaps with an ace-high flush draw, I would check call the flop. Either way, I definitely feel like I got maximum value out of that hand by playing it in an unorthodox fashion. And it's important to be willing to get creative, to try to squeeze every ounce of value you can out of your hands. In tournaments, you're only going to be in these situations once. You're pretty much never going to be in the exact same situation in tournament poker. So it's okay to get creative. It's okay to play in an unbalanced way. It's okay to try to take advantage of your opponent's tendencies, their inclinations. Probably just go all in here. How else am I going to play a pair out of position, right? And we've seen that Felix Nub will raise fold when I had aces, so do it with that. So yeah, it's important to take advantage of your opponent's inclinations and tendencies. And I had identified Lazy Cash as an aggressive player who was kind of trying to run the table and trying to be the captain. So I was like, okay, man, you can go ahead and try to be the captain. I'm going to let you do your thing. Just little did he know that I was just kind of doing that for show. Here I'm getting an extremely good price, so I hope that I peeled this 3-bet. And on this board, I just fold. Yeah. I haven't seen anything from No So Perkin yet, and I don't think he was 3-betting a lot, but with a strong suited Broadway like that, I just don't really think there's anything else to do but take a flop in position, hope to hit the board really well, and otherwise just play cautiously. And on this board, I was pot controlling on the flop. It's just a board that's kind of all over his small blind flatting range, especially when he's defending from the small blind on a shorter stack. I feel like the shorter people are, the more likely they are to have like Broadway type hands. So it just really drilled him. And even though I have a gut shot in bottom pair, I just don't have that much equity against his overall range, and I didn't feel any need to get tied to that pot. And if there's any values, we see Felix getting lucky there with the King 4 suited, but definitely a standard spot. And we'll see that I am raising light in some positions, like I took the button spot with 9-3 off, but when lazy cash has position, I'm not opening too wide because he's shown that he's going to 3-bet me. He's shown that he wants to, you know, be a dick in position. And although I've, you know, kind of had a little bit of reign over him so far, I'm not looking to play pots out of position against a tough player who's going to put me in a lot of tough spots. As we go value bet, value bet, value bet here with Queen 9. So game flow wise, and just based on the way that the table was set up, I didn't feel that I needed to take like every single spot to open light with lazy cash being there, but I could still get my fair share, as we've seen. I think every single one of my steals so far has been successful, other than, okay, the ace-jack suited didn't work and the ace-5 suited didn't work, but we're batting like 800, which is very good. And at this point, this is the final table bubble, just for what it's worth. And with ace-king, like in this spot, could go either way with this hand. Could bet for value, but I saw that Silent Reg was flatting like really wide and really weird hands, and at the same time he wasn't too aggressive. So I want to do my best to take the nut high card hand to showdown. So I have to check call. If I bet, he's going to fold out all his unpaired hands, and he's going to continue with all his paired hands. So by checking, I put in the same amount of chips against his made hands that are ahead of me. But I also get to extract some value from his ace-high hands, which I'm beating. And then we just check it down, take it to showdown. He has ace-10. And I really don't like his flat call off that stack size, but hey, we've seen him open for 3.7x, 2.5. Silent Reg's just kind of all over the place. And it'll be important to remember this hand because he's definitely peeling too loose pre-flop, and that is something that we punish him for a little bit later. So here facing a 10 blind shove, pretty easy call with ace jack. It's a flip, and I remember when this flop came down, I chucked a tomato at Felix Nub. Actually, I waited till the turn to chuck the tomato at him because I wanted to be certain I was going to win. And sure enough, I got punished. Karma's a real bitch sometimes, and Felix Nub survived. But that's okay. Still sitting on the chip lead, very comfortable. And Felix Nub takes one out. And I think at this point, let's see, there were 12 or 11 players left. And I was in a comfortable chip lead. My plan was to, you know, try to chip up where I could by taking spots like this. And I felt that most of his hands were not going to fold to 2 barrels, especially with the club coming in. He could have pair and flush draw hands that would call again. So unless I was going to fire 3 barrels, I didn't think 2 were going to work. So I gave up, and he had the one hand that would have folded to 3, but again, I would have had to fire 3. 2 barrels wouldn't have been enough to get the job done. So at this point, my plan was to, you know, pick up chips where I could, mainly picking on Silent Reg. And I believe No So Perkin was extremely tight, so I'm probably going to attack his big blind a fair bit and just kind of watch the show as Lazy Cash and Felix Nubcake butt heads. So here we put Silent all in. He calls with King Jack, and I get rivered. And those were a couple of crucial pots that took me back down to the middle of the pack after I had been enjoying some top dog status for a bit. But I didn't give up. You know, I stayed focused. I just stuck to the plan. At this point, we're on the literal final table bubble. 10 players left. And, you know, although I was a bit disappointed that I didn't still have my chip lead, I just adjusted, you know. If I had all the chips, I could open the 9-10 suited, but with Lazy Cash being the guy who had all the chips, I didn't feel like opening and dealing with the 3-bet or dealing with aggressive reshoves from these other players. Felix Nub surviving. And I remember this guy just wouldn't die. I would chuck a tomato at him like every other hand because I'm like, yeah, you're going to bubble, man. You're going to bubble. And he was just like, no. And eventually I just had to start tossing trophies because I was just so impressed and so in awe with his ability to survive. We get a walk with the 7-9 offsuit. And I believe at this point, Felix Nub is going to bubble. All right, we're one player away from the final table. He's going to bubble. No. He survives again. But someone busted from the other table, and we did it. We arrived at the FT, the best place to be. And despite not being able to hold with the ace-queen against king-jack, and the ace-jack against sixes, I still came into the final table in 3rd place. Very comfortable position for me to be in. Unfortunately, the table draw didn't treat me that well, giving me the most aggressive player on my direct left, Lazy Cash, and someone who would also turn out to be extremely aggressive, El Sueno, to my left as well. Shorter stacks to my right, which is all right because I didn't have to worry about getting reshoved on too much, but I felt that my ability to open was going to be a bit limited due to the nature of the table makeup. Anyway, that's going to wrap up part 3, and we have arrived to the promised land, final table, and I have something very special for you next video. For parts 4 and 5, we will be navigating this final table all the way down to victory. It will not be smooth sailing, but it just makes for a much more exciting ride. I hope you were able to pick up a trick or two in this video. I know I did. It's always fun to review my hands and see where I could have gone a little different, but overall in this part 3, I'm pretty happy with how I played. If you're liking what you see and you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel to show your support by clicking that little red button below the video. Also, please leave your questions and comments as well. I always like to hear what you guys have to say, and I learn a lot from you guys opening up my mind and forcing me to justify things or look at things that I wouldn't have otherwise seen myself. So thank you in advance. Looking forward to your guys' comments. Anyway, that's going to do it for me. This has been Evan for Grips.com. I hope you enjoyed the video. Now, take what you learned, go out there, and get stacking.